Hello. We are live. And I guess I mean the royal we because you're not here with me and the cat's in the other room. So I are live. Hi. I am your host, John Hartness. I just got the email from YouTube that we're live on the tube of views. I am going to believe that I am live on the Book of Faces as well. And we're going to do some readings, we'll do some Q&As, and we'll do an injury update because since I am the founder and publisher of what should now be called Felstaff Books, I feel like I need to keep y'all updated on my condition and on the condition of every damn body else who works for this company, because it seems like none of us can stay on our feet. Hey, Peter. How you doing? Hey, James. Yeah. That's wild. I only get so many. The multi-stream doesn't give me all the chat, but going to YouTube chat, I don't understand how all this works. I'm just going to talk and look at the little green light, and I'm going to read crap on camera. But first, here's how I'm doing physically. I had a doctor's appointment yesterday, and he said that my left arm, which I can almost straighten completely out, is healing way ahead of schedule. So I shouldn't be as well off as I am, but here I am. So left arm's great. Right arm's still iffy. This bruising on the right arm, the doc says, is a little bit from the brakes and a little bit from how I'm maneuvering my hand in different ways to type and use my trackpad. So that's just gonna be the deal for a while, is that I have bruises. Let's see. There's a break here up near the elbow, and there are two breaks down by the wrist, and the wrist is sprained, and this wrist is a little sprained. But, it's all fine. This arm is healing pretty well. I'm going without the brace a lot more often. The doc said I can basically do anything that doesn't hurt, which is kind of how I try to live my life. I try to do all the things that don't hurt. One thing that did hurt that I found over the past few days is I also dinged up my nose. I can only imagine that it came from my glasses, because it looks like my glasses came down hard, scraped my nose, but this is kind of a pain in the nose. No, this is a pain. This sucks. It's irritating because I sleep with a CPAP, which goes right there. So between the CPAP sitting on the scab on my nose and the cat curling up on my throat, been a little difficult to get some sleep. Yeah, I'm having more issues with the scab on my nose and the cat on my face than I am with my broken arms. As far as the face goes, the black eye is healing, and there's no surgery required. My teeth are pretty much back in the right place. So I'm healing. I'm getting better. I'm still not quite able to load the truck, so Melissa is coming up tomorrow morning to help me load the truck for Multiverse in Atlanta this weekend. And Emily Leverett is riding with me, so if I get tired, she can drive. It's great to have people who can help. So I will be at Multiverse this weekend in Atlanta. I will have a shit load of books that I really want you all to come by, because lost a we lost a show. We lost Monsterama because I was too hurt to travel. So I don't like that. But that is not why you are here. You are not here to listen to me gripe about my face hurting or whine about revenue getting dinged because I fell on my face. You're here to see me read stuff and maybe answer some questions. So I've got 3 things I want to read for you guys tonight. One is from a book we just released last week called The Children of Menlo Park. It's a debut by Jessica Nettles. This book came to me from a convention. Jess came by our table at JordanCon. I think it was probably 4 years ago by this point. She came by our table at JordanCon. We talked for a long time. She sent me the book. I liked it. I suggested that she send it around other places. She did. Nobody else was smart enough to buy it, so I did. And then she and I worked really hard on creating this book and chiseling the best book out of it that we could find. And then I'm going to read a little bit from a book that releases tomorrow, Thursday, October 14th, and that is called The Devil Makes Three by Lucy Blue. That's a Southern Gothic horror novel that I was the lead editor on. Lucy and I worked very hard for about the past year on this book, and I'm really proud of the book. I think that it's really well written, and it deals with a lot of really ugly, nasty behavior by people, as many horror novels do. But it comes out tomorrow, and I'm going to read you guys the prologue of it. Oops. I don't really know what all the buttons do. So then I'll also read you a selection from Comes a Reckoning, which is Quincy Harker Book 8. That will be coming out in December. I've talked with Melissa. We figured out how long we're going to need to get it edited. I have the cover from Natanya already, so all I got to do is finish writing the damn thing, which is going to start next week when I get back from Multiverse, and then we'll be good to go. Yeah, Spicy, this one's not a series. It's just, Devil Makes Three is just a standalone, but it's fantastic, so you should definitely pick it up tomorrow. Let's start with this one. Let's start with Devil Makes Three, since it gets born tomorrow morning. And you can go to Amazon and pre-order the ebook, and it will be on your little Kindle or phone as soon as you wake up in the morning. The Devil Makes Three by Lucy Blue. When Andreas Clark burned down the Saxon County Courthouse, everybody who cared knew why. His case had been called the day before for trial first thing the next morning, and for once, Deputy Solicitor David Duncan had a rock-solid file. Andreas and 3 co-conspirators had robbed Smitty's drive-in, and somebody had brandished and fired off a gun. 2 of the others had already pled out, and both of them had named Andreas as the shooter. The 4th man had never been found, identified, or even acknowledged as real by the other defendants. Andreas was facing a full 10 years with no parole and no probation. This will be his 3rd strike, his 3rd conviction for a violent crime. His public defender advised him to pack a toothbrush. Jury trial or not, he was going to jail. So he burned down the courthouse. Or so everybody thought. It made a stupid kind of sense, Duncan said the next day, sipping sweet tea and eating a basket of hot wings at the Alavance Grill with Sheriff Buster Smokes and Colby Knox, the newly hired fire chief who was mentally spiffing up his resume even as they ate. All the paperwork was in the courtroom for the week. The indictments, the evidence files, the sentencing sheets filled out and ready. Burning it all had probably seemed like the only way out to a meth-addled three-time loser like Andreas. "Bless his heart," the assistant solicitor had mumbled, taking a bite of her salad. They found him in the backyard of his grandmama's house that same night, less than 3 blocks from the scene of the crime, sitting on a rusted metal glider next to the clothesline and sipping cheap malt liquor from a can. "Where y'all been?" he asked when he saw the lawmen coming toward him with their guns drawn. "You're going to have to come with us now, Andreas," Deputy Travis said. "We don't want no trouble." "Ain't gonna be no trouble." The dangerous felon put down his malt liquor and stood up. Behind the cops and beyond his grandmama's house, he could see the smoke rising like a nest of thick black snakes across the orange sky. "I'm going down the road tonight," he said as they cuffed his wrist behind him. "To Columbia, yes, sir," the deputy said. "For a long, long time, I expect." "That's all right." In the distance, something exploded, sending sparks into the sky. "Long as I'm leaving here." He had done a good job. The fire had started in 3 different places: the courtroom just past the metal detectors, the clerk of court's office and the records room for plats and deeds, and the mail room in the basement. The old brick and plaster building acted like a chimney. Pretty much everything was lost. Luckily, the clerk had just 6 months before gone on the state computer system, so all her most vital records were saved. But local historians bewailed the loss of 300 years' worth of mossy, handwritten documents and ledger books, long stored in acid-free boxes in the bare earth cellar of the clerk's office at the foot of a brass and cast iron spiral staircase that the clerk always said was going to kill somebody someday. 3 days after, Andreas was sentenced at a folding table set up in the empty derelict of a bankrupt furniture store downtown. As he was sent down the road for the next 30 years, a crew of graduate students came up the same road to assess the damage and salvage what they could. They packed the crispy, crumbling ruins into fresh, clean boxes and sighed over what had been lost. Somehow nobody noticed the jagged ruin of a 2-liter propane tank that had exploded in the flames in the farthest, dimmest corner of the cellar, or the narrow tunnels dug into the earthen foundation behind it, or the ancient iron strongbox inside, its lid thrown open and torn askew in the blast. Nobody squatted beside it or shone a flashlight inside. Nobody spotted the crude clay figure of a man blackened by smoke and broken cleanly in 2. So nobody saw the dark man coming. There is a content warning associated with this book. It does contain scenes of racial violence that many people may find disturbing. It's a tough book. It's not pretty. It deals with a lot of ugly things, and I think it deals with them as well as can be done. So, but there are some ugly bits in there. I want to make sure I'm in favor of content warnings for books. Actually, I think that if you are someone who has some significant issues with post-traumatic stress or terrible things in your background, you don't want to be sucked back into those awful feelings by a book. And I think that you can create content warnings just like that one. That on the right after the dedication is just a little line that says this book contains scenes of racial violence that some people may find disturbing. It doesn't make a big deal out of it. It's not spoilery. I've said it twice, and y'all still don't have a damn idea what happens. I haven't spoiled anything. And it's not a, I feel like it's not watering the book down at all. It will still have the same impact. It's just like when it flashes up on a TV show. There's violence, there's nudity, there's smoking. That one I find a little amusing. There's profanity. God, I should come with a warning label. So when we have titles that we think need them, we will include content warnings. Again, we're not going to make a big deal out of it, but we want to make sure people know what they're getting into. And Spicy's right. Warning labels let you prepare, or it does also set the mood. So, sorry. Let's move on to a selection from the Children of Menlo Park. Now, this one, I say it's Mark Twain Fight Cthulhu, which does happen. But that's not everything. And one of the things that Jess and I worked on, and one of the things that writers have to work on as they are developing a book, is you have to figure out whose book it is. This is something I learned. I learned doing theater when I saw a production of Glass Menagerie, and the production failed because the director and actors hadn't decided whose play it was. All of your three major characters thought it was their play, and the director didn't make a choice. So all of their blocking and direction was on the same level, and it was a jumbled mess because nobody was in charge. Somebody's got to be driving the bus in a story. And you can, with that play in particular, you can make an argument that it's Laura, Amanda, or Tom's play. You can make the argument for any of those three. I think you're stretching it if you want to make it the Gentleman Caller's play. But somebody's got to know. Somebody's got to be driving. So when the director didn't make a decision, it left the show a jumbled mess. And one of the things that I specifically had Jess work on in this book was, whose book is it? And I think that she did a great job in deciding whose book it was and then bringing everything to that focus. So this is the beginning of The Children of Menlo Park, which is available now wherever books are sold. Kate Warren, senior female detective for the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, glanced up from her work as Shadow, her partner and liaison between the Pinkertons and the mysterious group known simply as the Brotherhood, stepped out of a dark corner of their shared office on Washington Street. He became more solid as he moved closer and into the warm gaslight that glowed around her desk. His appearances from the darkness had become less disturbing during the years she'd worked with them, and she'd learned to be prepared for almost anything when he'd return in this manner. She pulled a small brush from a lower drawer in her desk and handed it to him. As he brushed away alley dust from his dark suit pants, she continued clicking along on the Hammond No. 2 typewriter she used for all their reports. "Did you see the girl?" He hung his coat and hat and picked up a stack of letters out of the slot in the pigeonhole cabinet by the office door. "There was a fire. She came to town with the Halvard boy." "How many dead?" He took out a slim letter opener and began slicing open one of the envelopes. "Only the parents. She saved the boy and the horses and drove them into town despite her hands being burned. She either can't feel the pain or was focused on getting to safety. The boy was crying, but she was as calm as you or me. Mr. Edison said she might be that way. She tucked her report into the vacuum chute to Alan's office and was thankful for the conveyance. Dealing with the man himself was not something she was keen on at the moment. Things had been awkward since her funeral. She hadn't reckoned on how disturbed and confused her former companion would be when she arrived at the office a few days after she was buried. Her body may be done, but her spirit was not. She'd made the decision to continue in the inside, the world of the living, within days of her arrival to the outside, the world of the spirit. Now, she was sure she'd miscalculated a few things in her haste to continue doing what she loved best. Her partner continued to sort through the mail. We need to extract the girl before she lights up an entire town. Kate sipped from a porcelain teacup ringed in pink roses. It had always been her favorite pattern. You make this sound like she's on the attack. Her partner tossed empty envelopes into the trash bin and stacked the letters on his desk. She's already killed 2 people. 3 if you count O'Neill. Setting the cup on her desk, Kate pulled a cover over her typewriter. Did it look like she set the house on fire on purpose? Her partner shrugged. There's no way to be sure at this point, or maybe ever. Sounds a bit like O'Neill's death. No way to know, which is why I find your connecting the girl to his demise disturbing at best. Shadow arched his eyebrow and smoothed his mustache in that way he did before arousing discussion. This is one of the things that she appreciated about having him as a partner. He was always up to counter her claims. 300 years of experience with people and argument made his viewpoint more challenging to come up against than most men, even Alan. Noticing that her cup was empty, she called up a matching pot. She thought better with a cup of tea. One of the perks of being a ghost is that she could use some of her energy to conjure things she loved most from her former inside life. While she could manipulate items in the inside world, she still used the typewriter on her desk. Being able to have tea at her desk was a bit of a luxury. The aroma of bergamot wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, and she smiled. This should be fun. Her partner sat down at his own desk. We both know O'Neill didn't just plunge into the river on his own. She poured steaming liquid into her cup. He suffered from melancholy, did he not? Not when he was on a case. The gangly detective pulled a bottle of 4 Roses whiskey, his favorite, from a small glass-doored cabinet behind him. He was a bit of a bulldog like President Grant. I will give him that much. Her partner continued. O'Neill visits the farm. 24 hours later, he's floating in a creek only a mile from the Halvard property. There were no gunshot wounds, no knife wounds, and the lady at the hotel in town said he never came back after leaving to go to the farm. If that girl felt the least bit threatened, who's to say she didn't follow him long enough to find time to shove him into the river? She laughed at this bit of conjecture. You cannot be serious. O'Neill was almost as tall as Pinkerton. She's not a big girl, is she? Her partner shook his head. Just a slip of a thing. But with a bit of stealth and good timing. He made a hand motion indicating going off a cliff. Even with my level of skill and ingenuity, I'm pretty sure I couldn't shove Pinkerton off into a river, even if I'd wanted to. Shadow chuckled as well. Maybe after he'd had a few drinks. Wait, what was it the notes said about not looking her in the eyes? She picked up a file from her desk and rifled through it until she found what she was looking for. Agents should not make eye contact with subject. Something about bad luck following. If he looked the girl in the eyes... Seems a bit far-fetched. O'Neill was new to our unit, right? We deal in far-fetched, remember? And yes, this was his first solo case with us. Perhaps he saw this like you do. Far-fetched. There aren't many agents on staff who deal with the sort of cases we deal with. Alan swore O'Neill would be a good fit. If O'Neill's death is connected to the visit, then it could have been caused by a lack of understanding of the situation on both O'Neill's part and the girl's. I doubt she intended for him to die. Even if his death is accidental, I have a suspicion that this fire is less of an accident. Maybe you can ask her when we bring her in. Kate turned the last page back. This is odd. Shadow came around to look over her shoulder. What are you looking at? It's what I'm not looking at. It's what's missing from this file. The lady detective flipped through several typed and handwritten pages. There's Edison's letter. He pulled it from the file. And what's left of O'Neill's notes about how he found the girl. She laid a small notebook emblazoned with a single eye. Her partner took the empty folder from her, but no interview notes. So O'Neill never visited Menlo Park at all? This was not protocol. Kate checked her desk to be sure the interview notes hadn't slipped out. There are no notes from Pinkerton saying not to visit the client, so why didn't O'Neill do the interview? I'm not sure, but perhaps we should do it for him now. Shadow joined in her search and even checked under the typewriter. Should we ask the man upstairs? He pointed and scowled in a way that made her laugh in spite of herself. No, I have no desire to rile an already unhappy bear. She studied the notes in the file again. Go ahead and check things out. You can get there faster than I can. See what the inventor says. While you're gone, I'll look through the file once more to see if I missed anything. Shadow put on his black overcoat and bowler hat and turned down the gas sconce so that one corner darkened. He parted the darkness and stepped into the paths to make his way to Raritan, New Jersey, the small town near Edison's Menlo Park. And that is the beginning of Jessica Nettles' brand new The Children of Menlo Park, which, like I said, is available wherever books are sold, including at Multiverse this weekend. We do and will have copies for sale. And now I've gone through the first half hour or so, and I guess you probably want me to, I don't know, read a little Quincy Harker, since that is kind of, the series that pays the bills. My bills, anyway. This is actually chapter 4. I'm going to start someplace different. If you don't know, Comes a Reckoning is the eighth title in the Quincy Harker Demon Hunter series. It is the culmination of a 2-year story arc that crosses over Bubba the Monster Hunter series and my Quincy Harker. If Bubba and Quincy got in a fight, who would win? Or maybe you do. I'm not going to tell you whether we find out or not. But there's definitely some alpha male posturing bullshit when these two meet up for the first time. But chapter 4 is an interesting flashback scene, and I think that it will give you some insight into some things that are going on in this book and a little bit of a heads up on where the whole series is going. So here we go. Chapter 4 of Comes a Reckoning. Available for pre-order soon and available for purchase in early December. I lay in my bed with a beautiful woman curled up asleep beside me, her warm body stretched out against mine, feeling the sweat drying on our skin as she snored softly into the bend of my elbow. I stared up at the ceiling, thinking about these people, these wonderful, messy, impossible people who'd wormed their way into my life, into my soul. I thought I was done with that after Anna. I Thought when I staggered out of the Arizona desert in the 40s with no memory of the past 4 years that I would never let anyone back in like that again. It felt too dangerous. Not to me, but to everything around me. And here I was again, all wrapped up in a woman way too good for me. With a group of friends literally willing to go to hell and back for me, and no more deserving of them than I'd ever been. "Penny for 'em, Harker," Beck said, smiling up at me. I hadn't even noticed she was awake. "Just thinking about mistakes I've made, and family." "Well, if you don't learn from your mistakes, you're doomed to repeat them," she replied. That sounds like something my sister Maddie used to say. That no one was more doomed to repeat their history than me, because no one more steadfastly refused to learn from my own mistakes. Maddie was always a big thinker, if a little wordy. Maddie? Was that her name? You never talk about her, even less than your brothers. I barely even think about her. Not for decades. Probably not since a few years after she walked out of mine and Luke's life in Chicago in 1929. I lay there in bed with my fiancée and started telling her about a chapter in my life I thought long forgotten. The story of my sister, Maddie. Madeline Justina Harker. Maddie was young but fiery. She'd taken a lot of punches in her young life. Our mother died when she was just 2 years old, and father followed her 2 years later. Both our brothers died in the flu pandemic in 1918, so I was left with an 8-year-old baby sister and a whole lot of growing up to do very quickly. I lasted a year before I hunted down Luke, Maddie trailing along behind me looking like a very dingy rag doll with a bird's nest where her hair should be, and asked for help. "I am not in the habit of tending to children, Quincy. I think you would understand this, given what you know of me." Luke's circumstances had never been a secret from me. I was born the year before his eponymous book was published, and my father was thrust into a wholly unwanted celebrity. When my mother died, I was 16 years old, and I sat by her bedside. She told me the entire true story of her and my father's acquaintance with Uncle Luke, Vlad Tepes, Count Dracula. Stoker got most things right, or close to right, depending on perspective. And since he was working from the notes of, as Luke called him up until his death, that fat shite Van Helsing, there was a certain bias to be expected. So seeking refuge on his doorstep on a rainy night in London near the turn of the century was the most extreme of last results. I'd always got on well with Luke. He seemed to tolerate my wit better than my brother's roughhousing or Maddie's dolls. But there's a great distance between getting along well with someone for a few hours at a time and living with them. And that is what I was asking. "I know, Uncle," I replied, brushing wet hair back from my eyes. My own hair was only slightly less unkempt than Maddie's, having grown far longer than was fashionable or convenient. "But we have nowhere else to go. You're the only family we have left." That was the most terrifying moment in my life, standing on that front step in the rain. Not sitting by my father's bedside as he drew his last breath. Not screaming at the doctors to help my baby brother when his lungs were so full of fluid it sounded more like he was gargling than coughing. Not even standing in the cemetery holding Maddie's hand as our last brother was lowered into the ground was more frightening than asking Luke for help that night. He'd always been kind to us, yes, but he was still Dracula, the monster featured in so many stories since Bram Stoker had published his novel. He opened his mouth, I'm sure, to tell me that we were not family, that we had no blood ties, in fact, when a savior in a tailcoat came to the door and roughly shouldered Luke aside. "Come in out of the rain, you little idiots," Renfield said, stretching out a hand to both Maddie and I. "Get in here where it's dry. I'll fetch some towels and put some tea on. I'll put a big spoonful of honey in yours, young lady, and we'll get you all warmed up. Then I'll make up the guest rooms on the second floor for you, and tomorrow, when the sun is shining bright again, we'll go to your house, get your things, and move you all right in here." He was smiling when he said it, the spidery-limbed servant of my uncle's, but his gaze brooked no argument. Luke, for his part, simply stepped back and nodded. "As you wish, Renfield. Welcome to my home, children. Please think of it as your own. I must go out for a bit, but if you are awake when I return, we can discuss your situation further." Part of me thought I knew what he was going out to do, but the greater part of me didn't want to think about it in the least, not with my little sister preparing to bed down under the same roof. I swore then that as long as we remained under his roof, I would mirror Luke's schedule. If he slept, I would sleep. But if he was awake, no matter how late the hour, I would not let my eyes closed, no matter the cost. I never wanted the responsibility of raising my sister, but after reading so many tales of the depravities of Luke's wives, I felt obligated to keep her from becoming that sort of succubus or other creature. Obviously, I learned in years to come that succubi aren't something you can turn a human into, and that Luke's wives were not some type of bizarre harem that he kept for sexual gratification, but rather 3 female vampires who were under his protection from both human and supernatural dangers. I did not learn, nor did I ever attempt to learn, the true nature of my father's dalliance with the women in question. He was not my father when that happened, nor was he my mother's husband at the time, and some information is far better lost to history. In other words, I did not want to know if my dad boned 3 vampires and donated more than blood to them. I know they fed on him, and that he drank from them as well, as is evidenced by my oh-so-twisted DNA. Not all my weirdness is demon transference from Luke passed down through my mother. Dear old Dad's youthful indiscretions had some effect on my genetic code as well. We know this to be true because neither Luke nor his wives were celibate, or even indiscriminate. But my parents were the only time Luke had bitten someone Luke had bitten, married, and made babies with someone that his wives had dallied with. Voila! Quincy effin' Harker. Luke seemed surprised to see me awake, if barely, in his den when he came home several hours later. He walked into the room as if he were coming home from the opera rather than sucking the life's blood out of some poor unwitting victim, and stopped cold when he saw me sitting by the fire with my feet up on an ottoman and a copy of Great Expectations open on my lap. I had a blanket over my legs and had changed into a pair of Renfield's pajamas, which were a bit long for me, but did the job well enough. "Hello, Quincy," Luke said as he hung up his hat and coat. He had given up his penchant for long, flowing cloaks by the time I was old enough to remember, but he still enjoyed an ankle-length coat. "I thought you would be asleep in one of the guest rooms by now. I stayed up to speak with you." Luke sighed. It's to be one of those conversations. Let me at least take the edge off the night with a drink before we get on to the tedious bits. Would you care for something?" This was not how I expected things to go. But I was young and adaptable, and knew my uncle to have a taste for the finer things in life. I assumed this extended to his whiskey. "Yes, please. Scotch or Irish?" "Irish, if you have it." He nodded and walked over to the small bar. He took 2 glasses down from a shelf and poured a finger of amber liquid into each, then paused and added another 2 fingers. He handed 1 glass to me and sat in the other armchair in front of the fire, holding out his hands to warm himself. At that moment, fresh from feeding, his skin was tinged pink, and he looked more alive than I'd ever seen him. I could almost believe he was just an ordinary man, until he turned to look at me, and sat with such perfect stillness that he seemed more statue than living creature. Which, of course, he wasn't. "Threats or bargains?" he asked. I blinked at him a few times, thoroughly confused by the question. Huh? I wasn't terribly eloquent as a young man. To be frank, with the exception of a modicum of skill in poetic profanity, I'm not all that eloquent as an old man. "Do you plan to bargain with me for your sister's safety, or just threaten me with some heinous demise should I hurt her in any way? It's certain to be one or the other, and knowing both your parents as well as I did, I would expect your natural inclination to be to threaten. But it is a different age, and one that considers open violence gauche. So if you are truly a product of your environment, then perhaps you plan to offer me something to keep her safe." "Neither," I said, taking great pleasure in the look of surprise on his face. Through the decades, one of the great joys in my life has been surprising Luke. When someone has lived as long as he has and seen all that he has seen, he tends to think there are no surprises left. I see it as my job to prove him wrong as often as possible. "Oh?" He raised an eyebrow. Lucas Card could give Dwayne Johnson eyebrow lessons, I swear. "Am I at least correct that you stayed awake to discuss your sister with me?" "Yes," I replied, "but I have no intention to threaten you. I doubt it would do any good. If even half the stories told about you are true, there's very little left in this world that frightens you. And I'm fairly certain that a bankrupt 23-year-old Londoner does not have access to any of those things." "I'm certain of that as well. But you said bankrupt? Your parents were fairly successful, I thought. And there was money in your mother's family." "There was. They were. But they have been gone for 5 years now, and running a household in London is not an inexpensive proposition, nor is boarding and educating 3 siblings, especially when one has, shall we say, not applied themselves with much dedication to either education or employment. So you're an impoverished wastrel who now comes looking for me to rescue you and your sister from the poorhouse." "Her, at least," I said. "I can make my own way if I need to. But I can't raise her in any decent flat in the city and keep a job to pay for it. I don't have any skills, Uncle. Father barely kept things afloat after Mother died, and when he passed, it was everything I could do to keep us all clothed and fed. Then the boys got sick last year, and..." I spread my hands, as if laying the litany of my failures out on a table before him. "I can't take care of her like she needs, and I can't lose her. So please, Uncle, if any of the things Mother said about you are true, help me take care of Maddie." He looked deep into my eyes, and for the first time I understood why people claimed to be mesmerized by him. The uncanny stillness, mated with his chiseled features and deep brown eyes, created an arresting tableau. Finally, after studying me for a full minute or more, he nodded. "Yes. I will make sure no harm befalls her, and to such extent as I can prevent it, you either. We shall be a family, Quincy, or as much of one as a motley group such as ourselves can be." I let out a breath and took a long sip of whiskey. "Good," I said. I drew out the wooden stake I'd been holding down by my right leg. "I'm glad to hear it. Now we can move on to the part where I tell you if I see even so much as a mosquito bite on my sister's neck, I'll shove this stick through your heart by way of your arse. I swear it on my dead mother's grave." And that is chapter 4 of Comes a Reckoning. Sorry. Took me a minute. As I was going through there, you may have noticed sometimes I'm looking around, looking down. That's because that's the alpha read version of the book. That's the first time I've looked at that chapter since I wrote it several months ago. So that's the first time that I've gone back through it, and there are things I found that I was like, oh, that needs to change. Oh, that needs to change. Oh, I left off a letter there. I left out a word there. Oh, I repeated myself. So as I was going, I was correcting things. And for anyone who's interested in writing, having either reading your stuff out loud or having your computer read it aloud to you is a great way to find words you missed, words you repeated, letters that you left off, making sure you've got the right homonyms, that kind of thing. Actually, I guess having your computer read it to you won't catch homonym errors, but it'll catch all that other stuff. So it's really good, and a lot of people find it very useful. I don't do it as often as I should because I'm very often running right up against release time. So I don't always have enough time to go through it more than once before I send it off to my editor. And usually that's how I work. Usually when I'm writing, I write a chapter a day. And then I do a lot of inline correcting as I'm writing. So I'll go back and type the same thing. I'll type the same thing 3 times before I get happy with it. Sorry, I'm moving the screen because it got moved off and it was bugging me. So we've got a few questions from the Facebook group. Not a ton, so if you guys have anything, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to go have ice cream. Stephanie asks, how much do you outline/prepare when you write? NaNoWriMo is on the horizon. Stephanie also says that she was sincerely helped by me saying on a YouTube video, no one wants to read your NaNoWriMo project. No publisher wants to read your NaNoWriMo project. Your parents might. Not really. Edit that shit. How much do I outline? It depends. If it's a short story, it's probably only going to be about maybe a sketch of a sentence at the beginning, maybe a sketch of a sentence as to where I'm trying to go, and then I'll have a rough idea of the scene I'm trying to describe. Because short stories are so small, there's not a whole lot to outline for me. For a novel or a novella, I typically break it down into the number of chapters that I need to hit my word count goal. And the way I figure out my word count goal is it a novel or a novella? And for example, if it's a Quincy Harker novel, I look at how long the last one was. Because I don't want the new book to be significantly shorter than the last book, because then people will feel cheated by paying the same money for this new book that's 10,000 words shorter. So I look at and try to make sure that we're within 5,000 words of the same length. My chapters are usually about 2,000 words. I want to write an 85,000 word book, so I start with 40 chapters. I know that I'll add in a couple extra chapters as I'm going, and I know that some chapters will run long. So 40 chapters and an epilogue usually gets me to between 85 and 90,000 words. Then I go through 40 chapters also breaks really easily into a good 3-act structure, with 10 chapters for Act 1, 20 chapters for Act 2, and 10 chapters for Act 3. So then I go through and I write down a little sentence about what happens in each chapter. I'm doing these motions because I'm literally kind of gesturing as to how Scrivener lays things out. It's got all my chapters on the side of the screen, so I just go through This is what happens in chapter 1. This is what happens in chapter 2. And I just write a sentence or two. If I'm in a place where I'm feeling like I'm suffering from some paralysis by analysis and I'm not getting anything done, I will outline in chunks, and I'll write that outline, and then I'll take a second, stop. Okay, well, I just did this. What needs to happen next? And then that's what I'll write. So for Comes a Reckoning, I outlined the first 20 chapters, and then I took about another 10. Then I outlined a block of about another 10 chapters. And then I'm down, and I went through and I got to about 30. I got to about chapter 28, and I outlined the rest of the book. So that's kind of how I do it. Let's see. Someone asked if I narrate my own audiobooks. No. There's several reasons for that. One, it takes a long time. Two, I am an actor. I have been trained in how to do some stuff, but I've never worked in a studio, and I've never done professional voice acting, and narration is voice acting. Also, you can see in the background, one of the major reasons that I don't narrate my own stuff, right about there, right under my thumb. That window unit air conditioner runs pretty much 11 months out of the year. I live in North Carolina. My house isn't quiet enough to record. It amuses even me, but I can't record here because it's easy enough to find time when Susie's asleep, because my office is downstairs. If she's upstairs asleep, she's not going to interrupt anything. The cat, however, I'm surprised he hasn't come in here bitching already tonight. And then the air conditioner. Also, I hate editing audio. I've done it. I've done it for plays. I've done it for podcasts. I hate it. So if I don't have to edit audio, I'm in. So that's why I don't narrate my own. Circumstances don't really work. Plus, I've got great narrators. John Solo and James Foster are fantastic. And Joe Hempel for the Black Knight Chronicles. I've been really fortunate to find great narrators. And now that Tantor is producing most of my audiobooks, I just don't have to mess with it. So I love not having to mess with it. So that's audio. Let's see. Yeah, I don't really have any other questions. You guys were pretty quiet. So I'm just going to say thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging out. And I hope that you will all go pick up The Children of Menlo Park. I hope that you will all pick up The Devil Makes Three. And next week, after I get back from Multiverse, I will have the pre-order live for Comes a Reckoning. And if you want to make sure you get notified of all of that, you can go to the Falstaff Books website and sign up for our newsletter. You'll also get some free shit. So if you're in and around Atlanta, I hope I'll see you this weekend. If you're going to be around Charlotte in November, come see me at the Heroes Aren't Hard to Find giant mini-con. This mini-con feels a lot like a small Heroes Con, which is to say frickin' massive. So come out to the convention center and say hello. Hopefully, I won't have this at all. Oh, yeah, somebody had asked me about Dalton, Georgia. Um, Hi, Queenie. Was that you that had asked me about Dalton, Georgia? Um, so I set Bubba's home in Dalton, Georgia, mostly just because of where that town is located. It's in about the right spot. It's pretty remote. It's in mountain country. I can get him in the backwoods pretty easily there. And I've driven through there, but I've never spent any significant time there. A lot of my impressions of Bubba's World are basically built off of the Black Mountain and Mountain City and Clayton areas of Georgia, because I have a cousin who had a vacation cabin up there. So that's why I set it there. It was small. I wanted him to be a Bulldogs fan. I wanted him to have played for the Dogs, because I'm a Georgia fan. I'm a Bulldogs fan. It's the only safe thing to be when you grow up in South Carolina. You're either going to be a Clemson fan, a Carolina fan, or something else, and I chose something else. So, yeah, it's close enough to Atlanta to be near a major city, but it's far enough away to be in the damn hills. So that's why I put Bubba in Dalton. I looked at Google Maps, which is how I do a whole lot of world building. So thank you, Aaron, for popping in and reminding me about that question. And in the meantime, I'm going to try to make this a weekly thing, weekly story time with John. So you guys go online in the Facebook group and leave comments about what you want to hear me read from. I will read from my stuff. I will read from other Falstaff stuff. So until then, I am headed to Atlanta on Friday. So I will be stocking up on the generic ibuprofen and not really drinking much, because, well, I can't afford to fall down again. Thank you guys. Thank you folks for coming out. I really appreciate you.